Spoiler alert! I'm not going to include TIE Fighter in this list. As good as that game is, it's not for everyone. If you sit the average person down in front of TIE Fighter, they're going to be very confused and potentially angry too.
I don't understand this mirror thing.
Trust me, playing and enjoying computer games is one thing, but to really gain a greater perspective on just what it is you've experienced, you need to have historical context about the title, especially if it's something from years ago. Likewise, I'm not going to be listing the pioneers of 10 different genres. That would be an easy way out. No, this list is for games that have a universal combination of both appeal and importance about them. Games that everyone needs to play at least once, even if they don't enjoy themselves. Doom. An absolute no-brainer. Doom was responsible for bringing the first-person shooter into the mainstream spotlight, to the point where it was selling more copies than the biggest operating system of the time, crashing servers worldwide and causing an enormous moral panic with its satanic imagery, real-time lighting, multiplayer communities, modding and so much more. When looking back at what made gaming the scene it is today, there's so much you can attribute to Doom's appearance. Doom refined the ideas previously presented in the genre into such a potent mess of demon-slaying madness that I still regard it as the best first-person shooter ever, and I didn't play it properly until much later in the day, so I'm not biased by fond memories from the 90s. Colonization. Civilization is synonymous with turn-based strategies these days. Colonization, on the other hand, is seen as a spin-off series that never really landed the same way. The thing about Colonization is that, much like our previous entry, once you've got a formula right once, you don't need to improve it again. Build colonies, trade with the motherland, and explore a brand new frontier teeming with intriguing factions and political elements before finally declaring yourself as a sovereign nation. The early Sid Meier games had a simplicity about them that belied their more complex nature, and nowhere is this more apparent than Colonization, which boasts that every game you play is different, offering potentially infinite replayability. Day of the Tentacle. It's not my favourite point-and-click adventure game, it's not a pioneer, and it's not even the first in the series. But none of that matters whatsoever, because this is the perfect distilled example of a classic LucasArts formula. Wacky characters, bizarre situations, side-splitting dialogue, and mind-bending, time-bending puzzles serve as a perfect introduction to the genre for new players. Plus, it was fully remastered by Double Fine, so there can be no complaints about the cartoon graphics either. And if that wasn't enough, you can play the entirety of the first game inside the second. So that's 2 games for the price of 1. Tyrion 2000. Unbeknownst to the general public, the top-down vertical shooter was actually perfected in 1995 by one guy called Jason Emery. He decided to take all the previous components that had been designed since the late 70s and distill them into a title that was pure, concentrated fun. Tyrion is forgiving to newcomers. You fly about the screen and shoot everything so that it doesn't kill you, and you pick up power-ups and upgrades to improve your ability to shoot everything and survive being shot at. Couple this with a fantastic craft upgrade system and a surprisingly entertaining plot in the form of data cubes, and you've got yourself an addictive title that you could play for the rest of your life. Oh, and it's completely free, so pick up a copy. SimCity 2000. Switching from 2D to isometric perspective, SimCity 2000 is the sequel to what was essentially the game that started the genre, and one that has been considered the greatest of all time. How do you follow that up? By improving everything, and making another title considered to be the greatest of all time. Easy. SimCity is a city sim, to the shock and surprise of nobody. Look after a city and cause it to blossom. Or be hopeless and despotic and destroy it with all kinds of horrible disasters. The choice is yours, and whatever choice you make, it never gets old. Fallout. Yes, it's technically a DOS game. The Fallout franchise is enormous these days, but it's important to remember what the small team at Black Isle Studios crafted under Interplay's RPG wing. An almost isometric open-world RPG with turn-based combat that is still regarded as one of the finest made by purists. Fallout's clunky VATS combat and user interface may be off-putting to many initially, but once you get the hang of it, there's a rich story to uncover in the apocalyptic wastelands. So even if you get stuck in the opening cave and torn to pieces by rats, it's important to give this one a try, because it sits squarely between modern RPGs and the likes of Wasteland and The Lord of the Rings. Command & Conquer Red Alert. After a genre-defining Dune 2 and the commercially successful Tyrion Dawn, the Command & Conquer series decided to go into alternate history. The result is a rollicking RTS title that was their last prior to EA's acquisition of the company. It's also probably the best example of a mid-90s RTS that still holds up to modern-day scrutiny, thanks to a wonderful remaster from Petroglyph and Lemon Sky Studios, which is the sole reason I've listed it here instead of competitor Warcraft 2. Lemmings. You're in charge of a group of lemmings that merrily march their way into oblivion without your constant supervision. Your goal is to save as many of them as you can by getting them safely to the other side of the level. If you save enough, you can proceed to the next level. You instruct your lemmings with specific orders, but you have a limited number of these per level, and a time limit on top of things. An absolutely addictive real-time puzzle game that'll bring you as much frustration as fun, and one that has never been successfully duplicated since. XCOM Enemy Unknown. An entirely different sort of turn-based game, and one which kickstarted a brutal genre of tactical squad-based survival games. XCOM's design is not for the faint of heart, and at times it can be as impenetrable as a nuclear sub. So why do I recommend it? Because underneath the interface and the unfair AI, there's a game of tactical skill and complexity the likes of which has never been seen since. And that's the reality of a lot of DOS games from that era. They didn't hold your hand, they required that you read the manual, and many of them were brutal and punishing because their target audience was different than the people who game in the 20s. The more effort you put into understanding the game and its complexities, the more you're rewarded. Ultima Underworld. The Elder Scrolls years before they existed. On a par with Mario and Pong in terms of historical significance, but also an entertaining game to play even to this day. Another RPG graces our list, but this time it's in the first person, a real-time open-world first-person RPG that boasted so many incredible features for 1992 that it was years ahead of its time. WASD movement, real-time first-person combat, swimming, NPCs that felt lifelike and belonged to factions, a physics system. So many of the things you take for granted in modern games originate from this one title, including entire genres. And far from being a passable dungeon crawler, Ultima Underworld provides you with hours of fun, if you can forgive its understandable creakiness.